Welcome those of you who are just filing in. We'll be starting the webinar soon in about 3 minutes. My name is Marche. I'm from Advice Chaser. I am the webinar guru. So excited to have you here. And even though we're just getting started, I want to let you know that we welcome your questions. If you have some questions that you want to ask before we start, go ahead and ask them now. We'll put them in our list for the Q&A session at the end. We're so excited to have you. We have one hand raised, Deandra, I believe. Go ahead and chat in the chat box what your question is. We have all our participants on mute at this time. We've just got about 1 more minute before we'll be starting. And I want to thank everyone for being here. If you have any questions that you are interested in before we start, you're welcome to chat that in the chat box, and we'll be starting shortly.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Megan Coelho, the president of Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guests or get started, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We are thrilled to bring you this lunch hour educational presentation on 6 steps to creating a special needs plan. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using that chat box. We want this experience to be as educational as possible for you. Kelly Ruggles will be our moderator today. He is the president of American Reliance Group Incorporated and a longtime resident of Spokane. He is a well-known educator and fee-based financial planner. He also authored the Financial Playbook for Retirement and has educated and assisted over 1,000 retirees and pre-retirees over the last 25 years. He has a passion for education and believes that understanding is the first step in developing your personal plan to meet and exceed your goals. Over the years in his financial practice, Kelly has helped families plan for the care of loved ones who would need assistance well after his clients were gone. He's found this work extremely rewarding precisely because there's such a lack of support and information for folks who are dealing with these situations. In his words, the mark of a great society is the way we care for the most vulnerable among us. Barbara Bush is our presenter. As a National Social Security Advisor and Certified Senior Advisor, Barbara brings a broad base of experience in planning for and meeting the needs of adults with intellectual disabilities. Barbara helps families navigate the complex government benefits of Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, and she works to maximize these benefits for their loved ones. With a background in estate planning and probate, Barbara applies extensive knowledge of both legal and medical considerations required in the process of long-term planning. She assists families with developing life options for individuals with intellectual disabilities. So Kelly, I will hand it over to you as our moderator, and you can take it from there.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you to participants today for allowing us to come into your homes and your offices and share on this critically important topic. This is a passion for me, although I've been a financial planner for 20 years, 25 actually. Many of my clients have had this issue where they have a special needs situation. In addition to that, I don't want to sound, over the top here, but I've been a passionate member of the Salvation Army Board and also served on the Multiple Sclerosis Board over the years where I've seen these issues. And there's not much more a family has to deal with in terms of trying to figure out how to solve this issue with what to do with the loved ones going forward. So with that, I'd just like to let you know that we'll be monitoring the chat box. We'll be trying to answer the questions as we go along, and certainly at the end. With that, I'd also like to give my endorsement to your speaker today, Barbara. Barbara is a nationally known speaker and has tremendous experience in this area. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Barbara and say, take it away.
Thank you, Kelly, and welcome to everyone here. Yeah, thank you. So today we are going to be talking about what it takes to create a special needs plan. So, I will read down the list, but I'm going to expound. It is a process. It's not something that happens overnight. To create this plan, you need to address difficult issues. Discover your own uniqueness, your child's uniqueness. It's a lifetime endeavor, and it's dealing with both living and death issues. So it's really to ensure your wishes for the future are known. Marshawn, thank you. So I've broken it down to 6 steps. So the first is the care plan, and we're going to go over each of these. The transition plan, financial plan, legal plan, communication of the plan, review and revise. So as you build a home, you would want it to be on a very firm foundation. So building a special needs plan is the same way. You want to have the basic information, knowledge, and legal advice all get out. So whoever's going to take over for you will understand your wishes and your child's wishes. Next slide. Next slide.
I've already put up the next slide there. I just think your internet's a little bit slower here, so I'll try to anticipate that.
Okay.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. So step 1, the care plan. What is it? So what you need to write down, what are the unique supports that your child will require to replace those that you currently provide? So sometimes you have, let me rephrase that. I believe every individual with special needs is unique. You have unique needs, you have unique desires. Every person's circumstance is a little bit different. So embrace that and understand that someone with high functioning autism versus someone with severe autism to someone with Down syndrome, everybody needs something different. And then to look at what are the future support needs. Because we all have an end date. Nobody's here forever. And these are the things that will make your life much better if you have a plan for that future. And it's called a marathon syndrome because unlike a neurotypical family where, your child goes to high school, goes to college, gets a job, maybe marries, moves away from home. With a child with special needs, that's not the case. It's not as simple as that. Even if they're high functioning and they're going to live on their own, they may need some support or they may need a lot of support. And this is, again, unique to each family. So the transition plan. So where will your child live now and in the future? So your choices could be they're going to live with me forever because I'm not ever going to die. Or when I can't take care of my child, they're going to go live with their siblings because, of course, their siblings want them. But what happens if that sibling gets married, gets a job where she has to travel or he has to, and they're not at home anymore? So you need to look at, is that fair for your child? What kind of socialization, what kind of activities can someone provide? Even living at home with you, you can only do so much. You're one person or two. So the other choices would be community-based programs, private communities, or group homes. Now, when I say that, I'm thinking of, in most states don't even have this anymore. It used to be called a state-supported living, state school. Gotten rid of those. So the other part to this is the continuity of care and supervision. So who are the successors? What can you do to provide the needed supports? Are you the guardian? Is there going to be a successor guardian? Does the successor guardian know what's going to be responsible of them to take over? The trustee or trust advisor of the financial program. So here again, I always say, talk to your financial advisor because you want to find out if you have a trust who's going to manage the funds. Because you want the funds to grow, but you don't want your child to lose benefits. So, and then the advocates who are going to fill in the gaps. Who will give that child support when you can't? So a big part of the transition plan and the financial plan is getting and maintaining benefits. So how do you qualify for SSI? What happens because if your child is under 18, the parent's income and assets are deemed to the child. And unless you're living in poverty, the child will not qualify for SSI and Medicaid. Now, once that child is 18, they are an adult in the eyes of SSI or Social Security. So at that point, they look at their assets only, not the parents. So at that point, you would file for SSI. If and when you're approved, you immediately get Medicaid. So this is something, it's not a lot because you're getting a whopping $794, but it all has to do with budgeting and planning for the future. And the other thing is, does your plan have a heart? And that's called the letter of intent, and I'll be talking about that later in the presentation. So setting up your financial plan. Things to take into consideration are, what are the state benefits? Well, one of them is Medicaid, and that is, and the waivers. The Medicaid itself is insurance, health insurance. It provides for doctors, prescription drugs, may provide for some therapies. The waivers, um, the waivers will take care of therapies, housing, respite care, day programs, federal benefits, SSI, which is supplemental security income, SSDI, it's Social Security Disability Insurance. SSA is what we all work and pay into. Then there's Medicare and VA. So if the child or an adult has been in the veteran services, they become disabled, they would get benefits from the VA as well as Social Security. But if the parent has been involved in the VA, has worked during their life or been there during wartime, if they sign up for a death benefit for the child, so once they're gone, that child could be eligible to receive a small portion of the death benefit for their life. So again, for the financial plan is understanding that Social Security benefits, Medicaid, $94. If you have more than that of income, then you won't qualify.
Just a second, Barbara, you cut out there. What is the maximum that you can have that before you disqualify?
Over $2,000 in assets.
Okay, $2,000. Thank you.
There's also entitlement programs. This is the SSDI, Social Security Disability. That's because you have worked and paid taxes into the system. RSDI is Retirement, Survivor, and Disability Insurance. So for a wife, when the husband dies, she's entitled to those benefits, and it's called RSDI. When a child is disabled, the parent retires, they're entitled to 50% of the parent's Social Security benefit. With those entitlement programs, you get to receive Medicare. Now, if you're filing for SSDI or RSDI, you have to wait 24 months before you're eligible to receive Medicare. So here's a benefits timeline. So again, the child's aged 18 and they filed and have been approved for SSI and Medicaid. They can get up to $794. When the parent retires and starts drawing their own Social Security benefits, at that point, their disabled child is eligible for 50% of their benefit. So in this instance, I'm making up a number, and the parent's receiving $2,000 a month from their own Social Security retirement. Their child is then eligible to receive $1,000, 50% of that. It does not take away from the parent's benefit at all. And with that, if they've had SSI and Medicaid, they will not lose the Medicaid. They will get Medicare on top of that. They do not get the $794 and the $1,000. They get the larger amount. So if half of the parents' retirement is $1,000, they would get that and not instead of the $794. So then when a parent dies, that child is entitled to 75% of the Social Security benefit for the rest of their life. So they would get $1,500 a month, which again, working with your financial advisor to create this plan of how much will the federal benefits offset costs that you need. But one thing to note is to receive benefits from your parent, the child must be diagnosed prior to age 22 to be eligible for the parent's Social Security benefits. So if they're disabled prior to age 22 and Social Security has them listed as disabled, this will trigger at disability, retirement, or death. So again, here I'm saying, working with your financial advisor, what's the funding target? How much is required to make your plan work? How much will it cost to have your loved one in a residential? Are you going to be buying a house for that person? Are they going to live in a private community? These are all things you need to work out. The care plan. Who's going to be caring for your child? Is there some compensation if their siblings are taking care of them? Will money be left to them for that care? So these are all questions you need to ask. What medical cost? Medicaid and Medicare will pay for certain things, but they won't pay for dental, they won't pay for hearing aids, maybe vision. Maybe there's something extra that your child needs that those two insurances don't pay for. So this needs to be taken into consideration to create this plan. Personal cost. Did you travel with your child while they were at home? What's going to happen when you leave and they still want to travel? Who's going to pay for that? Are there funds set up in a trust for that person? Who's going to travel with them? How to pay for those costs? And then other costs. Maybe they want a TV in their room. Maybe they have a car. Who's going to pay for that? So all those things need to be taken into consideration when you're creating this financial plan. So there's 3 different buckets that I think of. So your federal benefits and state benefits can go into one bucket. Your personal assets are estate assets. And then other assets, benefits, or inheritance go into another bucket, and how they're handled is very important. So personal assets. This is any funds that have been accumulated in the name of the special needs person. This is something to be very, very aware of, because again, if they have over $2,000, they'll lose their benefits, especially the SSI and Medicaid benefits. Working with the tools you have in hand as a parent, I would say you create a special needs trust or an ABLE account. But if your child inherits money, Aunt Susie wants to be generous and give your son $10,000. Well, they're going to lose their benefits unless you work again with an attorney to create a first-party special needs trust. Or you can put the money into an ABLE account. Those are somewhat new, but that is a means for a disabled person to save more than the $2,000 and they don't lose their benefits. So again, both of those, the first party special needs trust and the ABLE account, have what's called the Medicaid clawback, meaning if Medicaid has paid anything for housing, medications, care for your child, they get paid back first out of any monies in those two types of account. So in the ABLE account or the first party. Estate assets. Well, this is anything the parents, grandparents, anybody have accumulated over their life. And so at death, that passes from one person to another. If you haven't written a will or set up a trust, it's divided equally. So if you have two siblings or two
Barbara,
children, yes.
excuse me, just a second. There are a couple real pertinent questions that have come in that I want to read to you.
Sure.
The first one is, how disabled does a child need to be to qualify for SSI when they're 18? For example, I have a high functioning autistic child who will probably be able to have a job someday, but will likely need support.
It can be difficult at that point because SSI has a very strict definition of what disabled means. They have in their, I call them, it's an acronym, POMS, Policy Operations Manual. And you have to prove to Social Security that that person can't work and make a substantial gainful activity, earn that amount, which is 1,260. Your child could be working part-time, not even making close to that, and they still say, they can say that they have the capacity to earn more, so therefore they're going to be denied. So it's very important to build a case supported by psychological evaluations, medical doctors, school records that show, and most parents want to see their child as, oh, they're great, they're going to work, they're going to be independent. If you're going before Social Security, you want to look at them in the other way. They can't do this, they can't do that, they'll never be able to do this. They'll need support in this area because otherwise Social Security
Barbara, you're cutting out. I'm sorry.
be paying you SSI.
Yes.
You need to have advice and help.
If I could add a thought here, this is, and Barbara, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I've helped folks do this. This is really similar, for example, if during your working life, something were to happen and you were to apply for Social Security benefits, SSI, there's a whole process that you need to go through that is pretty complicated, quite frankly. Barbara has a lot of experience in this area. There are also a lot of attorneys that specialize. So it's not as simple as just saying, here's the situation. It needs to be well documented. On the flip side of that, I just by coincidence have two semi-retired physicians, clients who work for SSI. So very similar to what we're talking about here. They're on the other end of this. And they're the ones who review all the documents and make a determination if somebody is eligible. So it's a complicated process, unfortunately. The best way to handle it, though, is to make sure that you're very prepared on the way in.
And if you do get denied, you can appeal it. You have 60 days to appeal. But you're going to have to find out why they denied and get supporting documentation to back up your claim.
Actually, denial can be fairly common, especially if you're not as prepared as you need to be on the way in. But that doesn't mean no, to reiterate what Barbara just said. Another way to say this is just keep asking the same question over and over again until you get the answer that you want. Barbara, there's another question here, which I'm not as familiar as I should be. Could you go back over the ABLE program? I think that is fairly new, correct?
Sure, yes.
Is that a national program?
Each state has that program. I'm sure Washington has an ABLE. It's passed by the legislature, but it was passed in, I believe, 2015. It's like a 529, but for someone with a disability. It's a means of being able to save money, invest money. Most states you can have up to $100,000. Personally, I don't recommend that because of that Medicaid clawback provision. So it's one thing to lose $500. It's another thing to lose $100,000 that maybe you would like to go to another person in your family.
Again, Barbara, help me out here. I know this is very complicated, and I always say knowledge is power. The difference between that and a special needs trust is where the ABLE account would be considered first person, where a trust would be considered second person, correct? So there's a lot of advantages to the traditional special needs trust. Is that correct?
Yes, and I always recommend both of them because a special needs trust cannot pay for housing. An ABLE account, that's one of the primary purposes, is to pay for housing or rent.
Are there any funding limits going into an ABLE per year?
Yes. You can only put in $15,000 per year. Now, on top of that, if your child is working, they can put in those funds into their ABLE account. But those funds are still counted against your.
Okay, if I can just summarize that, because I think it's a really important point. Ideally, a family would set up both then. They would set up a special needs trust, which is long-term, but they would also fund ongoing a ABLE trust, which is, again, similar to something that could be set up for college education or medical costs, because the ABLE account will be able to cover things that the special needs trust will not. Is that correct?
Correct. And the ABLE account,
Thank you.
if the parent had set up a 529 for education, and then they find their child's not ever going to go to college, you can roll over your 529C for education into the 529. I think it's an A. I may have my alphabet wrong. But
okay, that question just came in. So the difference between a 529C is an educational 529,
correct.
or a 529A is actually for special needs situations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
So let's see. So again, when you are planning, the parents are planning for the future, you can have the assets designated to go into a special needs trust for your child upon your death. You can create one separate from your will. So this is something you would need to take into consideration. But you do need a will, you do need a special needs trust, and you do need an ABLE account. That's a lot, but to plan correctly and to make sure that your child doesn't lose any benefits, it's best to, again, have this comprehensive plan.
If I can, there's one more question here. So in a real life example, I have a client, the family have a daughter who is disabled. She is able to work part-time. So the proceeds from her work, could that fund a 529A?
Yes, it can go in there, but it's still, if she's receiving SSI, they have this certain formula. And I'll go over it briefly. So the person makes $285 a month. SSI said you can keep that first 85. We're going to divide the remainder in half. So $100 will be subtracted from your SSI benefit. Doesn't matter if you put it in the ABLE account or you put it in their own checking account. It still counts because it is income.
Thank you.
Mhm. So, supplemental special needs program or trust. So again, families can set up this trust either by using an attorney, or in Washington, they have a special program. And I'll go on to that with the next slide. But this protects beneficiaries, your child, for the eligibility for public benefits. Because in a special needs trust, you need an attorney that understands the rules and laws for a special needs person and Medicaid and SSI, because it has to be worded specifically that it will supplement and not supplant Medicaid benefits. So there are certain things you can't pay in a special needs trust for housing or food. That's what SSI is paying for. So you get a whopping $794, and 1/3 is food, 1/3 is housing, and 1/3 is personal needs. So in Washington, you guys are extremely lucky if you live there, because I'm from Texas and there's no such thing as what I'm going to talk about. There is something called a DD Endowment Trust Fund. So you can set this up through the state of Washington at the ARC, and they have two different trusts. They have either a standalone special needs trust or what I call a pooled trust. So again, talk with your financial advisor to see which one is going to be best for you. Or is it best, because if you have these funds, the state of Washington manages how they're invested, and they're invested very conservatively. You might have the opinion that you want them maybe a little more aggressive. Probably don't want them way out there, but maybe you want them to earn more money, so in the future, your child will have more money to live on. Again, that's a conversation with your financial advisor that I recommend you have.
If I can add a thought before we move on here, there's a couple questions. Barbara's been mentioning working with different attorneys. And if you do not know this, at least in our world, for example, when we help families with Medicaid planning, not a special needs situation, but let's say one of the spouses has ended up in, going to a nursing home. This is a really specialized area. I don't know how to say it any other way. It's just true. You don't just open the phone book and find an attorney and go visit them. The same is true with special needs. It's a very highly specialized area. Also Social Security. So that's a good, having a good referral system into a situation like that with people with experience, because as Barbara will tell you, these laws change fairly frequently as well. There's a real complicated question here. I'm going to go to it. And I think I'm going to pass on this one at this point because there's a lot of math involved, Barbara. And just let the person know, looks like it's Chris, and has to do with Social Security benefits, that it may be better to answer that off the air. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to do a plug for myself. There's a question about me. I'm located in Spokane, Washington. I'm sorry you missed the first 10 minutes. Probably the best way to reach me is, I'll just give you my phone number if you want to write it down. It's 509-444-6400. I'd be glad to speak with you.
And if there's anything related to Social Security that I haven't addressed, again, you can contact me at any time. And my information is part of this. I think it's at the end of the uh, program. And I am located in Austin, but you know, Social Security is nationwide. The rules apply nationwide. Now, the states are different on how they work with Medicaid waivers. Texas is the worst. We're 50th in the nation. Takes 18 years.
I'm sorry, Barbara, you're breaking up a little bit. Before you go, will Barbara's information be provided at the end of this webinar? It will be. I would highly recommend that you visit her website. Sorry, we're losing you, Barbara. Come back to us. By the way, while we're waiting for Barbara, I just happen to know that she's not in her home office. She was kind enough to go help a friend out who has lost a spouse recently. So we just lost her altogether. Oh, there she is.
She's back. Let's see if we can ask her to unmute.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm back with you. So the fourth part of this is the legal plan. And again, as Kelly said, I've said, make sure you find an attorney that specializes in special needs planning. There are, some of them are elder care law, some can be estate planning and trust attorneys, but make sure they understand special needs laws and rules. But a will manages your probate estate. Not everything is governed by a will. If you have a checking account, you have an agreement with the bank. It's called transfer on death, payable on death. So you've signed up and that money goes to someone else. So that doesn't go through probate. But if you have a house, stocks, bonds, those the title needs to be transferred through probate. Now the will, you know, you can name the guardian, you can name where your money goes to, you can have a will, a special needs trust within a will or separate. Now what I've seen though is the problem when one family had the special needs trust within the will, and then it was 30 years later, they passed away and didn't realize that the money was actually going to the child. And that disqualified them from any government benefits. So as long as you're alive, you can change your will, you can set up a special needs trust, but once you're gone, then it's in concrete. It's carved in stone once you're dead. But the estate also, each of us, and if your child is capable and doesn't need a guardianship, you can have them create, you need to create one for yourself, but a medical power of attorney. The durable power of attorney handles financial matters, and the directive to the physician is one that you would sign today with a clear mind, stating to doctors and to the physicians in your family, that if I have no brainwaves, do you want to be left on life support? Do you want to be taken off and die naturally? If you have less than 6 months to live, do you want to live on life support? Or do you want to die naturally? These are questions you have to ask. It's very personal, but it helps the family if that time comes. So these are all things that you need to take into consideration when you're meeting with the attorney. So the letter of intent, this is something I talked about earlier. It's an operating manual. It's not something that you put together once, put it on the shelf and forget it. It's a living, breathing document. I had a client that said, you know, my daughter was going to take over for me and she's going to take care of the care of my child. She said, the daughter said, I know I was going to take care of my sister, but I never knew she was going to come with a 3-ring notebook. But that notebook should say, who are their doctors? A lot of times they have more than one doctor. Have they gone to a psychiatrist? Have they gone to just a medical doctor? What medications are they taking? Who's prescribing those medications? Do they have SSI? Do they have Medicaid? Do they have the SSDI, Medicare? What are the requirements for those programs? So the person taking over ignores it. She gets a letter from Medicaid, said it's time to fill out this plan, and puts it in the trash. You know, these are things that whoever's taking over needs to understand what is involved with the care for that your child with special needs.
Barbara, excuse me for interrupting, but again,
Yes, please.
Going back to, you know, kind of the world, sort of think about it this way. Let's say you have 2 children and they're both fine. But you know, one of them maybe has a spending problem or whatever. So you decide to leave the estate to one sibling where they're supposed to give assets to the other sibling. Well, think about the problems with that. First of all, the sibling with issues has to go to their brother or sister and ask for money. I mean, there's just a lot of complications. And so this is often why it's better to have something professional set up with somebody that really understands the rules and the regulations, because this is actually much more complicated. Would you agree with that, Barbara?
Oh, 100%. I've seen it so many times. I used to work for a program, a residential program in Austin. It was private pay. Parents had set it up that the child was going to live there forever. They died, and the siblings went, oh, well, we're going to pull him out. Just keep him at home so we can keep that money. So it's best to have somebody other than just the sibling, and that checks and balances. And maybe the sibling's going to make medical decisions, but somebody else is going to handle the financial decisions. So again, the communication of this plan is so important. So whoever is going to take over the care, the medical concerns, communicate. Let them know what's part of the plan. I would suggest, as you get older, have that person involved. Have that person start making those decisions. You back up a little bit, but wouldn't it be easier to be able to pick up the phone and say, Mom, what did you mean by this? What doctor is this? What form am I supposed to fill out? Because if you die and just hand them a notebook and they have never looked at it, they have no clue, who are they going to pick up the phone call? So I always suggest talk to the people in your life about what's in that document. So I thank you. This is my contact information. Please feel free to contact me, email me, call me. I don't charge just to answer questions on the phone. If you want to hire me to do a project, then we'll talk about that. But, you know, I want to give advice. I want to help you in that process. So Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you if there's any questions.
There's one question that's pretty complicated that I think I will read to you. I don't know if we'll be able to answer it in detail. I mentioned maybe later, but I'd like to just add that, you know, life is complicated enough. And you're on this webinar because you probably have a situation where you have a child or a brother or sister that has or maybe a spouse that has some special needs. But there is a process. And as I mentioned earlier, knowledge is power. And the best place that you can get to, I think, is really having a concrete plan that you know will work and that's in place, so you can focus on the other things that you need to focus on in your life. People can handle almost anything except the unknown. And this is, this is a lot of information, and a lot of it may be unknown to you. So I guess with that, we'll ask for any more questions, but I think I will ask this complicated question now. Barbara, I'll read it for you. It's a Social Security. It says, for the 50% or 75% of a parent's SSI benefit, is this dependent upon the section of what the breakdown of the SSI for the parent and the spouse will be? So if you select that upon the death that your spouse will receive, for example, 75% of SSI, I think I might be able to answer this one, but I'll let you do it, of your own benefit is reduced throughout their lifetime, is the special needs child 50% based on the 100%? So I think, Chris, what you're asking is, when you select your Social Security for you and your spouse, a spouse can take either 100% of what they would receive or 50% of what you would receive. And then at your death, they could again elect to take 100% of what you would receive. And I think the answer is no, this would not affect the child in any way. Is that correct? Did that all make sense to you?
It does. So one of the things, when you file with Social Security to start receiving your retirement benefits, that's when you want to make sure that they know you have a disabled child. Because if the child has never received SSI and Medicaid, because on that SSI and Medicaid application, you're connecting the child to the parent's record. If this wasn't done when you file for your own retirement, you have to make sure Social Security knows that you have a disabled child. Now, at that time, you may have to file an application, but we're going to assume that you filed it, they know he's disabled, and at that point, they can have 50%, doesn't take away from yours, and then your wife, depending on the age, there's all kinds of little nuances and complications, is also entitled to 50% of your Social Security benefits. Upon your death, the wife gets 100%. This is an automatic thing. The wife gets 100% of your benefit if it is more than her Social Security benefit. If your benefit is $2,000 and hers is $3,000, she'll get the $3,000. But at that time, automatically, your disabled child would get 75% of, no, if the wife's the wife. So they have to give you the maximum amount possible.
Let me jump in here for a second. It's sort of off topic just a little bit. Obviously, Social Security, your Social Security, is an incredibly important thing. And if you have a special needs child, it needs to be treated differently than if you do not. So what we typically do is run Social Security optimization. And this may surprise you, but often taking Social Security earlier than later can actually benefit you in the long run. With a special needs child, that is not necessarily true, because now you're thinking of a third person, not just you and your spouse. So delaying your own Social Security for as long as possible may actually be very advantageous to the family as a whole. Again, complicated, but effectively running Social Security optimization is the best way to handle the situation.
And I'll throw in one more thing on that is your spouse and your child are only eligible to receive money from your, it's called a primary insurance amount. So if you're entitled to take Social Security at 60,
Breaking up, Barbara.
Yeah, and we're getting towards the,
6 or 67.
oh, there she is.
Okay,
I'm going to sum up
still
with
got
this
me?
because we do need to go. And
Mhm.
just let you know that
Okay.
that's kind of a complicated question that would probably be better to be answered offline and so
Mhm.
forth.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you guys. I appreciate it, Barbara. I appreciate it, Kelly. Thanks to all of the attendees who joined us here today. You all can look for an email later with a link to a replay of this event, and you're welcome to share that with friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find financial guidance that's a good fit for your life and your financial questions. Just so you know, we do have a matching service that's free to you. And every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. You can also learn more about us by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the Find an Advisor link. Once again, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you at another webinar soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.